Hey everyone, so my name's Kirstin. Like Professor Weigel said, I'm in Global and International Studies and focusing in global development. And I think what's really important when you're in a globalization program is to understand that globalization interacts with local context, with local forces, with local activists. And so globalization isn't this broad, disconnected concept, but it's something that is real and it impacts our daily lives. And so in conducting my research, I think to understand why it was important, it's important to understand the context. So David Harvey writes about our right to the city. And our right to the city is our collective right to shape ourselves by shaping our city. And so that means things like democracy. It means things like sharing our city, sharing our voices. It means public spaces and public ideas and interactions. And that right is being challenged by neoliberalism. So the spread of neoliberalism as a discourse means for our cities things like reduced public spending, reduction in public services, lack of democracy because we're focusing on things like accumulation and focusing on growth and business development over the people who live in our cities. And so I wanted to conduct a discourse analysis of campaigns that are working so that people can have their voice heard in their cities, so that activists can influence the spaces that they live in. And I chose to study free public transit, first and foremost because it's an issue that I'm involved in, that I'm active in, and that I'm passionate about, but also because it's an interesting research tool, because free public transit can be argued for from a number of different perspectives. It's a social justice tool, but it's also an environmental tool, and it's also in some cases an economic tool, because it can bring workers to work and bring shoppers downtown. And so activists can approach this from a number of different perspectives. And so in order to understand the two different campaigns, one in Ottawa and one in Victoria, I did a progressive discourse analysis. And so a discourse analysis is where you're looking at what are people saying, how are they saying it, why are they saying it, what are the assumptions behind what they're saying. And what I specifically did was a progressive discourse analysis. And this is different from most discourse analysis because people are often focusing on the dominant discourse. So what are the powerful people saying? What are the big ideas? What's the dominant hegemonic discourse that's being produced? Whereas a progressive discourse analysis is saying, let's shift away from that. Let's look at what the activists are saying. Let's look at what progressive voices are saying. Let's look at how people are trying to challenge the dominant idea. And the reason that we do a progressive discourse analysis is because what we research on and what we focus on is what gets reproduced. So when we focus on the hegemonic discourse, when we focus on, let's say we're always focusing on neoliberalism in our studies, that encourages it to be reinforced. Whereas when we're focusing on progressive voices, when we're focusing on activists, then their voices are elevated. And so by supporting and critiquing these voices, I was trying to inform activist work. And so my findings, I was able to come up with a few different recommendations for people working in the free transit sphere. I was able to come up with recommendations for activists in general and to produce outcomes like the infographic that you see. Because I think that what's really important with research, like Professor Weigel mentioned, is I'm an activist. I feel more like an activist than a researcher, but I'm interested in academia and I'm interested in what that brings to the activist space. And so with one foot in activism and one foot in research, we need to find ways to bridge that, because I think there are often silos that aren't in communication, whereas there's a lot of space for those two areas to reinforce each other and to help each other grow. And so moving forward, I'm going to be shifting away from the more academic side of my research project and focusing on the community that helped me develop the project by working with groups like Ecology Ottawa, Free Transit Ottawa, the Community Climate Action and Divestment Group in Victoria, and the Healthy Transportation Coalition. All of them I'm in communication with to turn this research into deliverable items that can help them with their work. So I want to thank CUROP for letting me do this work. I want to thank Professor Weigel for giving me enough help to figure it out, but also enough help to do it on my own, because I think I learned a lot that way. So thank you everyone for listening.